having me here tonight. I felt that kind of Christmas excitement as I drove down here today. Really, really happy to be here. So thank you, Richard, for inviting me. And I have to say, I am so glad that Richard is your priest. I don't know if it's just me, but priests get kind of weird about who follows them in a place. And I get a little picky about that kind of thing. And I couldn't have been more thrilled when I learned that Richard was serving here. And I had that feeling kind of like when two of your really good friends fall in love and get married. So I'm really glad you're here.
Thanks.
I can't imagine what you all must have thought when I showed up on your doorstep. Fresh out of seminary, what did I know about being a priest in a church? I wasn't even a priest yet, I was a deacon. You guys didn't even pick me. Someone picked me for you. And so, but you all, even with all of those kind of strikes against me, welcomed me so warmly. And for that, I am forever profoundly grateful. I learned a lot here. Like Richard, I celebrated my first Mass here. I did my first baptisms right there in this font, and I think they're here tonight. And you all taught me some things here that I have carried with me and will continue to carry with me. One of the things I learned is the beauty of smallness. And I'm not just talking about the physical beauty of this small church, although I really appreciate that. For someone who is short in stature, this is the only church I've ever been in that feels like it's the right size for me. It's kind of an Alice in Wonderland moment, and I don't feel like a little girl playing church at some big father's altar. Although metaphorically, I'm sure that's true. But I like that this church seems to be the right size for me. But this church is the right size. The smallness is its beauty. There's no need to be a huge church. Who's got a huge church in Speedsville, New York? You got the right size for this place, the right congregation, and there's something beautiful in that rightness. And that's why I asked Richard if we could read the portion, the story of Elijah, where it says, was God in the wind? God wasn't in a big, huge wind. Was God in the earthquake? No, God wasn't in the earthquake. Was God in the fire? No, God wasn't in the fire. God wasn't in all these big, huge, mighty, flashy things that you might expect him to be. God was in the sheer silence. And so I have no doubt that God is very, very present here. It probably would be unfair for me to say that God's more present here than he is in big churches, although I'm really tempted to say that. The other thing you taught me about was about the blurred boundaries between church and the community. When I first got here, I was, seminary trained, and I knew I was supposed to come in and administratively take a look at the records of the church and ask for the list of parishioners, which probably should have been edited and called out before I got there, but in case it hadn't, I should sit down and do that. And so I asked Ann Stoughton for a parish list, and she said, well, I think I have that. And we sat down together, and I knew that the attendance here was maybe 6 people, maybe 8, depending on how successful Joan was that morning in getting Ken and Ike out of bed. But when Ann presented me with the list for Speedsville congregation, there was 120 entries. Not even 120 people, but sometimes there were whole families for an entry. And I said, Ann, maybe we should edit a little bit to just to make sure the list accurately reflects the parishioners. Okay, Mother Carrie, sure. Let's go through the list. And sure enough, for every entry, there was, well, yes, this person's part of the church. They come and they visit us every once in a while. They just lost this person. We brought them casseroles when they were grieving. Oh, there's this person. She always brings pies for the turkey dinner, and she loves the church. Oh, and there's this person. He helped us paint when we had this painting project, and this person helps with the pancake breakfast or the thank you dinner or the chicken barbecue, and every person on that list was part of this community. And I had to shift my expectations in a really beautiful way, I think, to see not a division between church community and secular community, but here the boundaries are more blurred in a way that I think more accurately reflects the kingdom of God. I think that when we're truly living into the kind of world God is dreaming for us, there's really going to be no distinction between church and community. It's going to be kind of like Speedsville, where we're all one family, and we live together and we care for each other, whether you come to church a lot or not. We're going to give you casserole. We're going to check in on you. The other thing that you taught me, and I'm only naming some because I'm really fully committed to getting you guys to that dinner before midnight. If I list all of the things I've learned, we would be running really short. But one thing I wanted to talk about was the generosity and abundance that I saw here. There's just nothing that's really tiny about this church. There's so much love and such great personalities and great people and great ministries that happen here. And I think of your church when I think of our offertory and what's really going on in the offertory, where we bring the gift of bread and wine forward. These gifts that human hands have made, the bread and the wine, but it comes from God's grain and grace. So this whole interplay of God's gifts and our kind of taking that and molding it and shaping it, and finally bringing it to the Eucharist, where we bless it together with God for our use. And at the offertory here during harvest season, I have memories of people bringing extra squash or onions or zucchinis and sharing them with one another. And it was so beautiful. And never in a million years would I think, oh no, there's produce in the pews during a liturgy. But it was real, and it was God's abundance and God's gifts being shared with God's people as we prepared for communion. And it was so lovely and beautiful. And every church that I'm in now that doesn't share produce during the offertory, I have to admit that I'm a little bit disappointed. So all that is to say is that for me to stand here tonight, I'm profoundly aware that I am standing on holy ground. And I know you must all feel that way too, or else you wouldn't be spending your weeknight here tonight. This is holy ground. For me, this is a place that I would call a sin place. That's what the ancient Celts would call a place where somehow, inexplicably, the realm of earth and the realm of heaven come so close that they seem to be separated only by the thinnest veil. For me, this is a sin place in so many ways. And I know for you it is too. And probably you guys, like I did, recently celebrated All Saints' Day. I'm thinking about the saints in our lives, both the ones in the history books and the ones who enriched our lives in a more personal way. I was thinking a lot about the people for whom I find those places with. People that make God more real to me. People that seem so transparent and that their light shines through so much that I can see God in them. And the places that are holy like that we call sin places, and I'm not sure I really want to call those people sin people. But you know the kind of holiness I'm talking about. And it reminds me of a story. There was once this little boy who was in Sunday school, and his Sunday school teacher, probably around this time of year, asked the kids, "What is a saint?" And that kid must have racked his brain and thought of all the kind of churchy answers he could give. And he must have thought of the beautiful stained glass windows of his church when he raised his hand quickly and answered, "A saint is someone who lets the light shine through." Must have been thinking of one of those old stained glass guys of his church. And so today, part of what we're here to celebrate is the restoration of these beautiful windows. And when we walked in, some of us said, "Oh, you know what, it would have been something if we could rig up some lights so they could shine, the light should shine through and we could see the windows." And I think we don't even need that. When I look at all of you, I can see that light shining through. Because I think these windows are great, but you guys are the windows in this community. You are God's windows that allow light to shine through. And that's how St. John's is so much bigger than Speedsville. Because you take the windows that you are, those God's windows that allow God's light to shine through, and you bring them to where you live. In Berkshire, or Newark Valley, or Caroline Center, or Owego, or other places. And you bring them to where you work, like in Binghamton, or in Ithaca, or in Candor. So St. John's is so much bigger than Speedsville because you take the light that you find here and that you find in God and you bring it out. And that is what's so beautiful. So yeah, I think these windows are a great thing to celebrate. But as Richard said earlier, it's the community that is the real treasure here. That's where our deep celebrations are. And for us, this is a symbol and an icon of that light. So I encourage you to keep being God's windows. Keep being that transparent place where the boundary between church and community becomes only a thin veil, if there at all. Keep shining God's light that you've been given out into the world, just like you have been doing. Will continue to bless many, many people. Amen.
Amen.